Welcome back to the second part of the webinar. We are here in discussions with Mitra Banerjee and Kevin Peter about the impact of cyberbullying on mental health. So Mitra, we'll start with you again. What are some examples of cyberbullying?
Some examples of cyberbullying very commonly are abusive emails and SMSs, naming and shaming using hurtful words, posting private or embarrassing photos online and sending them to others, starting a website that rates someone's appearance or popularity, creating fake Facebook, Twitter accounts, you someone, stealing someone's password and impersonating them online. These are the very common and most commonly used, some examples of cyberbullying. And there are others which are cultural in nature, and it varies from countries to countries, using, religious images. For example, if somebody uses religious images from India and uses them to ridicule or in some kind of advertisement which are politically and religiously incorrect, that could be sometimes classified as cyberbullying. Cyberbullying, not a person, but a nation or a race. So that could be one of the examples of cyberbullying.
Sure. Yeah. Kevin, from part one, we discussed the victim bully equation from a power imbalance perspective. And essentially, the victim bully equation is a power play, that uses social engineering techniques to achieve objectives. So I'm curious about the kind of questions you would actually ask a cyberbully to understand their personal objectives.
I think I would ask him or her a bunch of questions. Primarily, the questions that I would ask would pertain to why you did this. Do you know and realize what you have done? Did someone say anything about this? Did someone encourage you to do this? Or on the other hand, did someone tell you not to do this, instead you went ahead and did this? What were your intentions behind doing this? Did you think about the possible consequences of doing this? Do you have regrets? And if you do, to what extent? So I think the reason I would ask a person, the perpetrator, these set of questions, is to find out their intrinsic motivation behind it, to find out if it was just a one-off, spontaneous, instantaneous thing, where they just felt like commenting and did that in a rude or obscene manner, or is there a more plan, a well thought out plan behind the action? Are there intentions to defame, hurt a person, or like Mitra said, a nation itself, a society? So these set of questions, if I ask it correctly, I think I would get a fairer idea of why a person did what they did. Is there a bona fide reason behind doing it? To hurt someone? Or was it just instantaneous? I did it without thinking, there was no thought behind it. So to get that sense of idea, I would ask these set of questions.
So Kevin, would you also explore their personal environment in terms of whether they, they feel a lack of acceptance in their community? If you are talking about nation, the kind of ideologies towards nation or citizenship, etc. But that makes it more towards hacktivism, from what I gather. But from a personal standpoint, their relationship with their guardians, their parents, their home environment, whether they would feel or they have felt neglected in the past, would these also be some points of exploration as far as you would want to understand their personal motivations?
I think when it comes to personal motivation, there are two ways to look at it. Like I said, there are some people who just want to see the world burn. who likes to hurt people, wants to cause injury and harm. So there's a clear-cut distinction between those people who do what they do, knowing fully what they're doing and what the end result is going to be. So that's one category of people. The second category are the ignorant type. They don't know what they're doing. They don't think about the potential consequences. No, one can't fault a person for being stupid. We all are at some point. So just because a person did a stupid thing doesn't mean they are a bad person, as long as they're willing to learn from it. So that's the second category of people. And there are the third category. It's a emerging field, I would say. It's the field of paid uh, trolls, people who go online purposefully with the intention of causing harm, and they're getting paid for it. Who are the people paying them and who are benefiting? It's open for a different discussion, for a different chat. But so I think there are three different classes, distinctions um, for an average bully, a troll, or that you find online. So we can't paint everyone with the same brush. I don't think we should do that.
This question is to both of you. This just popped up. So could there be a scenario where a perpetrator was once a victim of cyberbullying? And they've kind of internalized that experience within themselves, and they would like to get back at the world or their environment to shed off, that kind of burden and regain or get empowered in the process. Can that be a scenario as well? Any of you?
I would, yeah, I would think so. Like from a very from a behavioral perspective, as we use the word transference, it could be that if I'm bullied, I would like to bully somebody. It can happen because to get that, that kind of feeling that if I have been bullied, why can't I do it to others? It's like an anger, it's like a frustration, which, I express, and I transfer it to others because I feel hurt and I feel at the same time dissociated and hurt. And I'd like to transfer, but I think Kevin will be a better person to give a more analytical and a more psychological spin to this whole concept. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitra. And I agree with you partly regarding the internalized anger, frustration, hurt, trauma that they take out on other people. But I think it applies more with real life bullying rather than online bullying.
Right.
Because like I said, in the very first question that we addressed in the part one of this series, a person suffering for a victim who has faced the brunt of bullying has a lot of issues that they go through, anxiety and depression and PTSD and whatnot. So I don't think that person would internalize it and suddenly become a bully themselves.
Right.
What usually happens for a bully is it's a societal confirmation and upbringing and the kind of stories that they listen to, the bubble that they exist in. So it's social conditioning also, the kind of news cycles, the news stories that they listen to, the unfounded fears that they have about themselves as an individual and about their immediate society, the race that they ascribe to, belong to, feel like wanting to belong to, or it could be a gender thing. So there are these fears that they have, listen to, get bombarded through our news channels, stations, and it is mostly such unfounded fears that translates into bullying.
Right.
They feel like something's not right, I should correct this. And it's my duty as an outstanding member of the society to correct the flow. So that's how, it's a personal opinion, but that's how I think most of the bullying takes place.
Right.
And I also agree with you. And I also find it very interesting, Kevin, because from a personal experience, I've seen people and a Parajita, who suffer from sometimes gender fluidity. They also have that tendency of bullying because they themselves can't sort of internalize their issues. So sometimes the way they behave or sometimes the way they communicate, it tends towards borderline bullying as well. I sometimes feel.
I guess when you're
There might be.
And I guess
Well,
when you're drawing the concept back to the anonymity and the empowerment that one achieves, with this interplay of anonymity and empowerment online, I think it depends on how a person is internalizing that anonymity and hence, like going out and bullying people online or taking or being a perpetrator. So I think there's kind of a role or a balance that we need to kind of explore, maybe in the later series, regarding anonymity and the way a person internalizes that anonymity and the kind of psychological aspects it has, which empowers them to perhaps take on a different persona to kind of overcome their past or their
Insecurity.
insecurities or PTSDs. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that just popped up.
Hmm.
But Kevin, on that point as well, what about the victim? What kind of advice would you help them in dealing with cyberbullying?
um, I think for a victim, they should begin with every comment that they get. I would ask them, I would suggest them to read it and then reread it, see how it develops. Because bullying isn't something that happens out of the blue like that, with some random stranger saying a bad thing to you. Most of the times, I see that it comes from people that you interact with, sometimes on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking about online space, of course. So see how it develops. Maybe it all starts with fun and games. It's a joke here, a joke there, a mean comment here, a rude comment there, a sexual joke, a, a comment with sexual overtones, and that transcends into a threat. So there's usually a pattern. So for a victim, I would ask them to be on the lookout for it, see how the relationship develops, see red flags, if any, that crop up on the course of communicating with the people, with the person, and with people. And once you start doing that, once you start receiving, once you start feeling like these are hate comments, approach someone, seek help, show it to someone else, get feedback. Because sometimes we can easily get offended by things that aren't really, bullying in nature. So just confirm with someone if this appropriate or inappropriate. And once it has been established that it's inappropriate, report, and block. All the major social media platforms allow you to do both of those activities. Report the comment, report the user, and also block the user. And if you want to escalate it further, name and shame them. Name them by their IDs, their actual names, or whatever the fictitious names that they give them. Name it and shame them. Using the same social media platforms that you're using, the same social media platforms from which you have coped the hate. So use the same platform to sort of name them and shame them. But never respond in kind. I would suggest never to respond in kind, never to feed into the trolls, feed into the hate comments by going and repeating the same, because it will soon become an endless, bottomless pit if you start responding to hate with hate. So block, report, name and shame if you really want to, be a bit petty, but don't respond in kind. Don't respond to hate with hate, more hate.
That's an interesting take. And Mitra, do you think online bullying is worse than physical bullying? And how difficult is it actually to disengage from cyberbullies? We've had Kevin's perspective in part one. What about you?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that there are overlaps with traditional bullying and cyberbullying, but cyberbullying is somewhat different. So, what is the difference? The difference lies in the virtual platform. The cyberspace is a virtual platform where bullying happens incognito, as I mentioned, and happens with a lot of power imbalance, where the perpetrator cannot see the victim and the victim cannot see the perpetrator. but it is more sort of, I would say, it creates more harm than traditional bullying. And the harm is inflicted, which is even greater because of, the incognito, and you cannot see the person. And why it creates more harm than traditional bullying, as Kevin mentioned before, that you can disengage, where you're doing in traditional bullying, the bully is there, the victim is there, you can disengage and you can communicate, you can stop talking to the perpetrator. But in case of cyberbullying, you cannot do that because it is done on this virtual platform, and the users or the victims, they always use the internet or the cyberspace for different activities, for different transactions, like paying, online paying, or general communication or a messenger. But the cyberbully, he or she kind of penetrates that network or that space and bullies the person. So it's very difficult for the user to leave the cyberspace because he or she is always engrossed with, and it's very sort of the use of digital platform in this day and age. You cannot avoid it. So therefore it's very difficult. You cannot engage. The main thing which I'd like to point out, that when in a traditional bullying, when you disengage, it does not, you forget about the perpetrator. But in case of cyberbullying, it leaves an indelible mark in your subconscious mind, because as I mentioned before, it's like pleasure and pain. You know that it's hurting you, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling unconscious. You're feeling depressed, you're feeling aggressive, you're getting cluster headaches, but you're not aware why it's happening. So it's like you would want to avoid, but you cannot avoid. So it's a kind of addiction, and therefore it's very harmful, as it is very difficult to disengage, and even it stays in your subconscious mind. Therefore, it is more dangerous because sometimes it can lead to phobia, in a person, that every time you're going on to the internet, you will feel that somebody is threatening you. So it's that perception of somebody threatening you, it creates phobia and anxiety, and therefore it's more dangerous. It's not happening, but you are anticipating that fear of being attacked, and therefore every time you're going over the internet, you're getting anxious, and therefore it's very dangerous, and it's worse than physical bullying because you cannot disengage, and it leaves a very kind of a negative impact on your subconscious.
And Kevin, families are also under stress while helping the victims cope with the situation. How could families of the victim reach out and support them? And are there any therapies that could assist victims in overcoming depression or anxiety associated with cyberbullying?
Right. Just going back to what I earlier said about, I think we should look at the entire field of. There are, like I said, there are people who do it willingly, knowingly what they're doing, but there are the vast majority, I feel, so don't do it knowingly. They don't know what they're doing. So we got to look at it from a more humane perspective. And with that in mind, I would say the families have to get involved, and as I'm hoping they do it with in the course of like a sex ed talk that the parents hopefully are having with their children. Talk about computer literacy, talk about internet literacy, which are both real things. The vast majority of our population, and I can speak for the entire globe, the entire world as well, a lot of people are just coming online. It's their first glimpse into world culture through internet. And it isn't how you should get introduced to world culture. I would suggest start with books, movies, and TV shows. Internet is the last space because it's interactive. So suddenly you're introduced into this different culture, so vastly different from yours, and supposed to react and act in a way which doesn't gel well with your preconceived notions of what is right and what is wrong, your belief system, your ideologies. So what should be done? The families, like I said, sit down with their children, even if they're adult children, sit down with them, talk to them, and have conversations about it. What is right and what is wrong, and how one should behave, and even if you disagree with someone online, how not to express that in a mean way, in a rude way, in a way which the other person gets hurt. So conversations, plenty of them, explorations of world culture, computer literacy, internet literacy before
And
you actually
basics
go
of
online,
communication as well, to add that in.
basics of communication, yeah. And just before I finish my answer, the therapies, I would suggest CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, basically to rewire our thoughts. I'm talking about both for the victim and the perpetrator, how we can look at a situation from a different angle, from a different POV. And also dialectical behavior therapy can also help, especially for the victim, finding more meaning in life, for finding more mindfulness practices by which they can decrease and the harmful effects of various anxieties that they develop from getting bullied. And also for the perpetrator, I would suppose, um, getting more DBT practices into their day-to-day life would decrease the need to react passionately. So they would would become more passive, I would think, regarding the reactions.
Sorry, pardon me, Kevin.
Right.
The last one was what practices? The CBT, which is cognitive behavioral
And
therapy.
yeah,
The second one that
and
you mentioned was dialectical
dialectical behavior therapy.
behavior therapy, and the third one was
No, that's it. Those are the two ones that I
okay.
spoke about.
Yep. So the first one's more for the victim, and it could also be used by the
It can be used for both people, the victim and the perpetrator.
perpetrator. And the
Just
second one
finding
is
new ways to look at the situation.
right. And the second one's
The
more
dialectical is just right. Sorry, I'm cutting off.
sorry about yeah.
Right.
So just for the dialectical. Yep.
Okay, I'll speak.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, please continue.
All right. So with DBT, it's about mindfulness practice. It's about being being present in the moment.
Okay.
So it's just about working towards a solution where you don't act impulsively,
Okay.
act based on our emotions at that moment. So finding more calm and peace within. So those come under DBT.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. And it just seems like cyberbullying is essentially a social issue that requires families, communities, and society to be aware of the psychological impacts experienced by the victim so that early signs could be detected, reported, and appropriately dealt with. Any final comments from both of you? Mitra?
I'm very sort of allured and to talk about hacktivism, but this is not the right forum because I think we have too much of input, Hacktivism, it's very important because we're talking about individual. I would definitely like to give a bit of idea input about hacktivism and how the cyber bullying has also sparked hacktivism to individuals and groups' perception of what they consider, as Kevin was mentioning, from an individualistic perspective, to be wrong and unjust, and hence incentivize them to do something about it, And motivations include, vandalism, revenge, political, social incentives, ideology, protest, a desire to embarrass certain organizations, certain political parties, certain individuals within organizations, or sometimes, sheer vandalizing places and other, concepts. And it's growing in number, and I can see that how this cyberbullying and the social media, we were mentioning, that so negatively impacts on changing the perceptions or steering people's perception to doing something which they're influenced to do, they're motivated to do, even if they don't want to do. So I'm just very allured to talk about that concept. So I thought I'll bring it out because we were talking about motivations and just and unjust and other things.
Kevin?
This is not, it doesn't fall within the scope of today's discussion though, but later on maybe we can discuss about hacktivism and other, impacts, from cyberbullying?
I'm not going to interfere this time, Kevin. It's just that the audio was a bit lapsed long time. So any final comments from your side?
Just to wind up, for the victim,
Yes.
speak out, reach out, and hit back in simple words. Speak out. If you're facing bullying, speak out about it, reach out. I know it's more murky in the online space to reach out, but find someone, reach out. If you can't find it online, do it in person, reach out, and hit back. Like I said, even if you don't hit back with hate, at least name and shame, shine light on the fact that you're getting bullied. So these are things that I would say to the victim. And for the perpetrator, I would say just ask yourself a few questions. Ask yourself, would I say this to the victim's face if I were to do this in real life? Would I say this? The comment that I just typed, would I say this to them in real life? Would I, am I gaining anything from this by, sending this comment? Is my life going to change in any form or way by doing this? And also, if I do this, if I send this comment, if I make this witty remark, are they really going to change their political ideology, or is the woman going to increase or decrease the hemline based on what I said? She is not, they are not, he is not going to. Nothing's going to change. So why am I still doing this? And we've been taught to think before we speak. Going forward on that, think twice, thrice, and quadruple times before you post. You needn't send everything that you type. You're not Shakespeare. What you're typing isn't Booker Prize worthy. Just backspace it, delete it. No one cares. Just backspace it, delete it. So that's what I
like it.
would say to
I
the
like
person.
that. That's a very, very implementable solution, Kevin. I love that, just backspace it, I'll keep that in my mind because I love to talk and write sometimes, I'll keep that in mind. Backspace it, quote unquote, Kevin's quote. I like it.
Yeah.
This concludes part 2 of the webinar. Thank you, Kevin and Mitra, for this session. We'll be back with a mental health series in the coming.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, both of you. And I hope you stay well and safe. And hope to see you two again in the next series. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Aparajita.
Thank you, Aparajita, and thank you, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you, Soft Mind.
Thank you, Soft Mind. Yeah.
Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.